The Athabascans, Old Ways and New Ways, by Ron Friedel. What if you and a few dozen others were the only people for miles and miles? What if there were no cities or towns? What if everything around you was wild and winters were long and cold? How would you survive? You would have to live like a pioneer. Long ago, pioneers migrated to a cold and wild land we now call Northern Alaska. They had to learn new skills and create a new way of life. And they did. These ancient Alaskan natives were known as Athabascans. Thousands of Athabascans live in Alaska today. Most live in cities and towns and drive cars and snow machines. But not so long ago, many Athabascans chose to live in small villages along rivers. They wanted to live in the old ways, not the new ways. They wanted to learn and practice the skills passed down to them from their ancient Alaskan ancestors. Finding food. What was life like for the people in these villages? How did they adapt to this harsh and wild environment? Nothing came easy. They had to make the best use of everything they could get their hands on, just like their ancestors. First, they had to feed themselves. Fish was their major source of food. Most Athabascan villages were located along rivers full of salmon. To catch them, villagers would use nets, spears, and poles with hooks, or they would set up fences to guide the fish into basket traps. They even built wide, spinning fish reels to scoop salmon from the river. They cut the fish into strips and used salt to preserve the meat. They also got meat by hunting and trapping wolves, beaver, muskrat, caribou, reindeer, moose, rabbits, and birds. Caribou. Camping. The Athabascans who lived in villages had to be ready for the change of seasons. With each new season, many villagers would travel to a new hunting or fishing place and set up a camp there. In summer, they traveled along the river to where the salmon were most plentiful. In the fall, they camped where they knew there were moose and caribou. In the spring, they went to where lots of sweet wild berries grew. Camp life was good fun, but there was lots of work. Even kids helped out. Older kids took care of babies, while the adults were hard at work. One Athabascan woman shares her memories of fish camp along the Koyukuk River. We worked hard all summer on fishing. We set a fish net and checked it once or twice a day. My parents, aunts, uncles, and older kids cut fish. The younger kids would also learn how to cut fish too. Younger kids helped by hanging fish, carrying water, and gathering wood. Cooking was also a big part of being in camp. We all had to chip in to make sure everyone was fed. She says that the summer she spent in fish camp were some of the best times in her life. Everyone in her community knew everyone else, and they all cared for one another. Athabascans dried fish for future use. Staying warm. The villagers used animals for more than just food. Animal hides and furs kept them warm in those cold Alaskan winters. They made soft winter boots called mukluks from moose hide and reindeer skin. They made winter gloves from moose hide and beaver fur. They turned caribou hide into warm pants, leggings, and shirts. They turned fur from wolves, muskrat, and wolverines into warm winter coats and parkas. Layers of fish skin made boots and parkas waterproof. Villagers also turned antlers and bones into knives and sewing needles, just like their ancestors. The ancestors believed that powerful spirits protected animals. These spirits expected the people to treat animals with respect. If not, the spirits would make the animals go away. So the ancestors set up strict rules for hunting, killing, and eating animals. And many villagers still honored their ancestors' rules. Mukluks. Hard winters. Winters were long and cold. In the other seasons, villagers could live in cabins, but winter meant staying in a house that kept the heat in and the cold wind out. These winter houses were half underground. That way, no heat from the stove or fireplace could escape through windows or walls. The roof was covered by a layer of logs, a layer of moss, and a layer of sod. From outside, the house looked like a great big mound of snow with smoke coming up from the chimney. Animals were scarce in winter. Villagers would have to live on food stored up from the rest of the year. For water, they would have to melt snow or chunks of ice from the frozen river. Getting around. People used dog sleds to get around in winter, or they walked from place to place on snowshoes pulling toboggans. The rest of the year, they went on foot or traveled by water in canoes made from birch trees. But what about long-distance travel? These villages did not have roads leading to cities and towns. The outside world was far away. For a long time, the only way to reach the villages was by river. That changed in the 1920s when bush planes came flying in. These little planes had landing gear for every kind of place. Some had skis to take off and land in snow. Some had pontoons for rivers or lakes. Others had wheels for flat, grassy landing fields. The planes brought mail. They brought supplies, such as oil for lamps, batteries for radios, pots and pans, and medicines. They brought people, such as visitors who came to see relatives and friends, and doctors to treat the sick. They even brought school teachers. One-room schoolhouses. Not all villages had schools back then. Sometimes the villagers had to join together and build a school themselves. Each school had to have at least 6 students. Some small villages did not even have that many. So children from 2 or 3 villages would all go to the same school. One man remembers walking 2 miles each way to his school when he was little. This could get scary in the spring and fall, he said. He would have to watch out for all the big hungry bears looking for berries in the woods. All the grades, 1st through 8th, were taught in one room all at once. One student remembers being the only 7th grade student on the school honor roll. But then, he was also the only 7th grader in school that year. Back then, about 60 years ago, schools used lanterns for light, a wood or oil stove for heat, and a barrel with a dipper for water. The bathroom was in a little building outside. One teacher remembers seeing fierce-looking wolves prowling around the school. When it got dark, she said, we always traveled in pairs, clutching flashlights. Green, fiery wolf orbs glared back at us from the surrounding darkness. For these Athabascans, living out in the wilds was an adventure. It was all an education. They learned the old ways and practiced them. But that didn't stop them from learning the new ways of a new world in school, even if the school had only a single room.